Welcome back, everyone. A couple months ago, I told you about a lawsuit that was filed against the National Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority over their transgender policies. It was filed by a group of sorority sisters at the University of Wyoming after their chapter reportedly approved a transgender member to move into the sorority house in the fall semester. His name is Artemis Langford. He's a 6'2" biological male. According to the lawsuit, he still uses proper pronouns like he and him, and he's also attracted to women. The Kappa sisters who filed the complaint also claim that Langford has allegedly watched them undress in the house and has had, quote, visible erections through his leggings. But despite all of these claims, a federal judge ruled on Friday the school did not violate any policies by allowing Langford to join the sorority, and the court dismissed the lawsuit. Criminal defense attorney and former head New Jersey County prosecutor Bob Bianchi joins me now with a legal perspective. Bob, thanks for being back with us. It's great to have you. What is going on here? I mean, how could any judge rule that this 6'2", 260-pound man, who still identifies as such, by the way, is allowed to stay in the sorority house? What about the real girls who are living there at their safety?
Yeah, I mean, so it really comes down to a very technical legal issue here, and that is basically the right to freedom of assembly and an organization being able to dictate who and who not can or cannot be a member of the organization. If you do not like the rules that that organization sets up, you're free to leave. And where these women, the current sorority sisters, filed this lawsuit, and what the court essentially said wasn't that they condone the activity, they don't understand the concerns, but that the organization itself had allowed this and that the court is not going to intercede with the organization's rules. Now, you can imagine, let's look at any organization we belong to. If the federal government or the government or a school comes in and starts saying your right to freedom of assembly is going to be curtailed because I don't like what it is that you represent or what you stand for, when they're not committing any kind of illegal conduct. So it was a really narrow legal ruling. That doesn't necessarily mean that these sorority sisters and women don't have a right to say, I want to be, they call it the safe haven. That's the area where they had, where only the women, traditionally biological women, whatever we call it, that we don't want a person who identifies with being heterosexual, a proclivity towards naturally born women that are in our dressing rooms when we're undressing, having an erection, things of that nature. That's obviously a very legitimate point. I guess, unfortunately for these young ladies, they're going to have to make a decision as to whether or not they want to continue to be in an organization that condones it or move on to some other organization. But it was a strict out legal ruling, which would have been different had it not been authorized and adopted by the actual organization itself.
Interesting. Perhaps some new laws should be put in place to protect real women. Bob, do you think the 7 women that brought this initial suit against the sorority's leadership could potentially do anything in retaliation to push back against this ruling? I mean, do you have any legal advice to them as to what their next move should be?
Well, it's kind of legal advice, I guess. You know, listen, I don't think the court's ruling was wrong, to be honest with you. I mean, they should put pressure on the chapter that allowed this to be to occur if they're against it, and they should threaten them. I'm sure there's going to be lots of women that are going to sympathize with this particular situation and basically give them an ultimatum. You either change this or we're going to leave and join another sorority. I mean, the pressure of losing membership is a powerful, and money is a powerful thing.
It is indeed. Alrighty, well, in other news, Kyle Rittenhouse is being sued by the estate of Joseph Rosenbaum, the BLMer that he shot and killed back in 2020. And now Rittenhouse, who, as we know, was acquitted of all criminal charges, faces 2 other civil lawsuits from the shooting. Can you break this down for us, Bob? What's going on with this case?
Yeah, I guess I don't have to tell your audience this was the subject of a multi-week trial in which Rittenhouse was found not guilty. Essentially, the jury finding not that he didn't do it, that was really not in dispute, but he did it in self-defense, which is an absolute bar to continued criminal prosecution, and that's why he was found not guilty. What the plaintiffs are alleging, that those are the individual in this particular case who was killed, the estate of the person who was killed, is that under a title, it's going to get a little wonky here, 42 U.S.C. 1983, that's a federal statute that guarantees your civil rights pursuant to the 14th Amendment. And that statute essentially says that your rights can't be abridged by an individual or moreover by the government. And what they did here was they sued not only Rittenhouse, but many of the police officers, the police brass. Essentially, what they're saying in the lawsuit, and I had an opportunity to read it just before I came on, is that the police departments and law enforcement agencies conspired with and or condoned Rittenhouse's behavior, and because of that, approximately because of that, these deaths occurred, or this death in this particular instance. The problem with the 42 U.S.C. 1983 case, a civil rights case, and I used to handle them extensively before I was the prosecutor, is that you have to show that there's a custom, practice, and policy of deliberate indifference. It's almost as if it's close to saying the conduct of the government actors, the police department and the town in this particular case, was willful. And under these unfolding circumstances of the riot and things of that nature, and given immunities, we talk about, I remember a number of years ago, everybody wanted to do away with immunities. And now that the political ball's on the other side, they want to use immunities, which essentially is if the officers were acting reasonably under the circumstances, the suit may not even continue to go forward. So I think the plaintiffs are going to have a hard road to hoe, in my particular opinion. But one thing I will just say as a caveat is during the course of that trial and reading this complaint, they're making a lot of assertions about the police officers soliciting these people to help patrol the streets and otherwise asking them to assist the police officers doing this. I don't know much about that because that did not come out during Rittenhouse's criminal trial. But if that's true, that may be an avenue. I'm not saying a good avenue, but maybe an avenue to keep the suit from being just outright dismissed.
Very interesting. Okay. Well, Kyle is also now saying the lawsuits are making it very difficult for him to move on with his life, and says it's actually extremely difficult to even go outside without fear of being harassed as a result of all of this. Do you think there's anything Kyle could or should do legally to protect his safety as this issue continues to drag out? And how might this also potentially influence the case?
Yeah, I really don't think so. I mean, I'm in this situation every day of my life where we have clients who don't fit within, quote unquote, the Domestic Violence Act, which generally issues protective orders by the court. And they're out there kind of swinging in the wind with regard to how they can be protected. I mean, they literally have to contact law enforcement anytime that they feel that their life is in danger. Listen, forget about Rittenhouse because it gives sympathies, one way or the other. The fact of the matter is, when you're involved in a litigious situation like this and you are a national figure, I don't care if you're on the left, you're on the right, or you're in the middle. There are people coming at you at all angles. It's a very daunting thing. The legal process is very daunting. It's very emotionally draining. When I used to do civil work, I used to literally tell people who want to file lawsuits that understand what you're getting into, because even if you think you've been wronged, you're going to go through a process of interrogatories and depositions and motions in court and costs and things of that nature. And sometimes it's better just to break away and move on with your life. Unfortunately, for a defendant like Rittenhouse, you can't break away because the complaint's been filed against you and you're just going to have to deal with it. And bottom line is, get a swami, get a religious spiritual leader, get as much protection as you can afford. Working with the cops, as lawyers hopefully would be doing that, and I mean that sincerely. I don't mean that as a joke. I mean you really need to center and be mindful as you go through something like this, because the legal system can really twist you emotionally.
Absolutely. It's never a quick or easy process, so my heart goes out to Rittenhouse in this case. All right, Bob, we'll end on a fun one for you. Burger King is now facing a lawsuit after claims were made that their portrayal of their infamous Whopper is much larger than what you actually get. So I guess hungry customers are outraged that the actual size of the Whopper is about 35% smaller than what Burger King has advertised. Bob, what is the deal here, and how do you see this one panning out?
Well, all I can tell you is you should really have my wife on for this, because she's like all of 105 pounds and eats Whoppers and McDonald's, and that's her mainstay.
What's her
She knows
secret?
everything. You know what? I'm eating a salad and look at this, and there she is eating that kind of nonsense. Anyway, so with respect to this case, you got a situation here where the plaintiffs argue that the pictures, this is really interesting how this judge ruled in this case, the pictures are 35% larger and demonstrate 2 times as much meat as what an actual Whopper really is. Now, listen, I'm not going to lie to you. I've always been against these lawsuits, kind of thinking that they're ridiculous and they're petty and whatever. But you know, the more and more the legal system doesn't address it, the smaller and smaller the patty becomes, and the larger and larger the price, for that. So this is why you have consumer fraud laws out there to say, you know what, if you are misrepresenting a patty, you could get yourself jammed up. So what this court did was it said, all right, so there's consumer fraud, potentially unjust enrichment. Now, the judge also said, and I'm just reading my notes here, that with regard to TV ads and online ads that were also brought in this lawsuit, he would not allow that part of the lawsuit to go forward because he found essentially that they never promised a bigger burger with more weight. But the pictures, a reasonable juror could find that they did that. So they allowed this suit to go forward, and there you have it. I mean, next time we have the topic, if you want an expert opinion, my wife is just right downstairs there. She can tell you right now a number 2 in Wendy's, a number 3 in McDonald's, a number 4. She knows the whole bit.
All right, tell her we're getting her on for next week for the next show.
You got it.
Bob, thanks so much for your time today. We're out of time for today, but we will see you and hopefully your wife next week.
Okay, great.
Take care.